I needn't say how marvelous it is to welcome so many, above all, so many from inside South Africa itself, because this conference is, as you'll very soon realize, unique. It's been organized in close consultation with and with the greatest cooperation from the government of Zimbabwe and Prime Minister Mugabe particularly, and of course with President Oliver Tambo of the African National Congress. I took on the responsibility of convening the conference, and with a small group of people in London who are prepared to work, and work very hard indeed, to organize it, we were able to launch what I hope is going to be an entirely and absolutely unique conference in this capital city of Zimbabwe. Honourable Prime Minister, President Oliver Tambo, Mrs. Palme, and Your Excellencies and friends. Before I call upon the Prime Minister officially to open this conference, I'd like to say on my own behalf a few words concerning the meaning of this conference as I see it. The fact is that for the first time, an international conference has been called to discuss together three main issues. They're spelt out in the title of the conference: children, repression, and the apartheid law, which has oppressed so many millions and destroyed so many thousands, not least thousands of children with immense potentiality and many gifts. We are here not to speak loud words, but we want what we say to carry across the frontiers of nations and to reach the hearts of the human family. Therefore, we are a conference which is here to work. We are here first and foremost, and this is the uniqueness of this conference, to hear from those people within South Africa who have traveled, many of them at great risk to themselves, to tell us what in fact apartheid and the present state of emergency and all the long years before, which I'm privileged to know at first hand myself because I'm now getting old, what apartheid really means. So often, the press, the media in the West is unable, particularly in these last months, owing to the restrictions imposed by the state of emergency, is unable to bring the voice of South Africa to the hearts of the world community. We have this opportunity. We know that we have massive support from the media, from all over the world. Those who are present here in this hall today will do their utmost to convey what is said and what is heard. And this is a unique opportunity. This is something which we cannot afford to waste at any point. And so I'm sure you'll appreciate that it is a conference for hard work, for listening, for deciding, and then for promulgating a program of effective action. That is the purpose and meaning of this conference, and it's focused upon children. We are well aware that in this very turbulent world, across the face of the earth, there are upheavals concerned with the struggle for human rights. But I would dare to say that nowhere in the whole world has this struggle found a focal point more clearly than in South Africa. And that focal point has always been, ever since the beginning of this century, ever since, you might say, the Union of South Africa, as it was then called, came into being by the deprivation of the franchise from the African people in the old Cape Colony. Ever since that moment, when very great African leaders, amongst them one of the founding fathers of the African National Congress, Sol Plaque, recognized in the Native Land Act of 1913 the reality of apartheid and pleaded with the world community all those 70 long years ago to take action. It was unheeded. And so again and again in the course of the struggle, it has been the children who have themselves recognized that it is their future which apartheid destroys. They have seen its destructiveness in the persons of their fellows, in life imprisonment for their leaders. They have felt it in their very being through the deprivation and the breakup of family life. This basic moral evil, which can never end until apartheid itself is destroyed. And it was that which brought the children of Soweto out onto the streets over 10 years ago with no weapons in their hands. The only weapon they had was the moral rightness of their cause. And as you well know, they were met, as always, by naked force, by guns, so that children as young as 7 years old were shot down for making that protest for their own future. And in the last 4 years, since the promulgation of the new constitution in South Africa, since the continuing states of emergency have been imposed during all these years as well, it has been children, as we shall hear, who have been the target of oppression. A state which is prepared to use its military and paramilitary might to destroy children is a state which must be outlawed totally from the world community until its ideological base is totally destroyed. So, Mr. Prime, doctors, social workers, churchmen, to come here and to state, Mr. Prime Minister, we know that you have an immensely busy schedule today, so we're all the more grateful to you for coming to make. And then the opening session of the conference will resume with speeches by President then and depending on the time factor, we'll adjourn for lunch, and our first working session will...
Mr. Chairman, Archbishop Trevor Huddleston, Comrade Oliver Tambo, President of the ANC, Mrs. Palme, Honourable Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. It is a singular honor for us in Zimbabwe that our capital city has been chosen as the venue for this unique conference on children, repression, and the law in apartheid South Africa. I personally feel specially honored and privileged that I have been asked to address the opening session of the conference. I wish, Mr. Chairman, to preface my statement with an expression of a sincere wish from the government and people of Zimbabwe that all the delegates here gathered will have a pleasant stay with us. We certainly trust that those who are visiting Zimbabwe for the first time will take time off to acquaint themselves with the generality of our people and some of the natural and physical attractions in our country. We like to think that the entire country is an open tourist resort and all our people are your hosts. On their behalf, therefore, I wish to welcome you all to Zimbabwe and to this conference. I hope I can be allowed to extend a special word of welcome to you, Archbishop Huddleston. You are no stranger to Southern Africa, having spent a good part of your life in South Africa and being one of the pioneers and an ally in the anti-apartheid struggle. Your continued fight from Great Britain against the evil apartheid system is greatly encouraging and is appreciated by all of us in Southern Africa. May I also say a few words of welcome here to our other distinguished guest, Mrs. Palme. Against the sad background of the loss of her husband, her presence here becomes even much more meaningful. And much more meaningful should be the topic which has attracted her to here in those circumstances. The international character of participants at this conference, Mr. Chairman, is a very clear manifestation of the universality of the feeling of revulsion and concern generated by the dehumanization to which the majority of the people of South Africa are daily subjected by the apartheid system in that country. I sincerely hope that the deliberations of this conference will enhance international awareness of the terrible plight and situation of the weakest and most vulnerable of the South African population, namely the children, the black children, who are, as we know, the most hapless and helpless victims of the evil monster that is apartheid. It is they who are daily malnourished by apartheid. They who are daily miseducated by apartheid, and they who, above all, are daily jailed, maimed, and murdered by apartheid. Yet international awareness of the suffering of the children in apartheid South Africa is alone not adequate unless it is followed by a resolve, determination, and strength to fight and eradicate the heinous system from our civilized world. The pariah state of South Africa has no legitimate claim to being part of the civilized international community, as long as the sanctity and respect for the rule of law has not been restored in that country. Indeed, no society has a right to be regarded and accepted as part of civilized humanity unless and until its legal system and practice guarantees the rights of all its citizens, regardless of race, sex, political and religious convictions. The prisons of South Africa are today full of children who, under civilized conditions, should be in schools, undergoing preparation for their future roles and responsibilities as citizens of their country. Alas, their prescribed lot is that of being murdered, tortured, brutalized, and imprisoned. I commend the organizers of this important conference for having invited some of the victims of the immoral racist regime to come and give their own testimony. Equally vital will be the accounts of the mothers of the victims, the lawyers who have dealt with the cases of the children, as well as the pastors and welfare officers who are battling to rehabilitate the emotionally and spiritually shattered young people and children in that sad land. Should any voice of conscience draw attention to the injustice of the system and criticize the so-called law enforcement agents, such criticism is contemptuously ignored. Recently, the Detainees Parents Support Committee published its informative reports or studies on tortures and detentions in the 1980s. The reactions of the racist Minister of Law and Order, the reaction of the racist Minister of Law and Order was characteristic. He accused the committee of vilifying the police. The cases of child arrest and assault and the sordid examples of torture in detention were dismissed as mere fabrications. The sleep deprivation to which young detainees were subjected, the suspension in mid-air, the kicking, beating, electric shocking, the stripping and numerous other horrific perpetrations which the youths and children received from their interrogators did not revulse the so-called Minister of Law and Order. How could they? Revulsion is a response of a person of conscience and morality. Mr. Flock and all the members of his apartheid regime are evidently men to whom conscience and morality are mere trifles. Murder cannot in such circumstances any longer revulse the bloody heart of its perpetrator, for each murder committed also has destroyed his moral conscience, hardening him more and more to the shedding of blood. The expression bloody Boer cannot be without significance. This conference, Mr. Chairman, and especially the testimonies of participants from South Africa, should provide a rare opportunity for relating to the outside world the story of the human tragedy taking place in South Africa. The traumatic and horrifying experiences in the dark and squalid prisons and detention centers are more clearly and vividly narrated by those who went through them. We have some of them in our midst. Mr. Chairman, as the report of UNICEF has recently illustrated, the tragedy of the black children and youths in South Africa extends to their brothers and sisters in the frontline states. I refer here to the report entitled Children on the Frontline, the Impact of Apartheid, Destabilization and Warfare on the Children in Southern and South Africa. This report draws an urgent and special world attention to the serious and desperate plight of the children of the entire subcontinent, and rightly attributes it to the apartheid regime's internal repression and destabilizing activities within the region. Indeed, many of you from outside the region have heard or read about the effects of South Africa's apartheid policies. The regime's economic disruption and political destabilization and their destructive effects upon the lives and welfare of the blacks